Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, we're here. Hello, we made it. We're in the thing. I'm back in the driver's seat. Things in Fey months are not good. We're not going to talk about it, though. Hello, I am GM Jim Heskett from Wizards and Wordslingers, and sitting over there today is...
I'm Brad Wolf from Dire Den.
And I am Ryan Doyle from the Vertigo Table, and I want to real quick take a moment to say hey to Twin Steel, whose party is increasing by 1 tonight. And should be... Don't watch too closely. Take care of your wife.
Congratulations. So, hey, let me tell you what we're going to talk about on the show today. First of all, you need to know, coming up in 89 minutes from now, we are going to be premiering The Waking of Willoughby Hall. Ryan's going to talk about it just a little bit later. The newest actual play from the one-page, one-shot club. And so, yeah, coming up right after the show, we'll be in the chat. I'm going to miss probably 45 minutes, the first 45 minutes or so while I go do something. Then I'll be in the chat. If I remember, this one's longer, right, Ryan? This one was like 3 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is like old school D&D. It's
Yeah.
a little less of a one-page. It's a departure. But it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. So coming up on the show, first we're going to do some speed dating, and I'll explain that in a minute. We've got some different news items, talking about a new game from Kobold Press. We're going to talk about subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3, DDB VTT, the maps from D&D Beyond. They keep updating it. They keep throwing lots of new features in it, and we're going to talk about that. Talk about monster layers, and we're going to talk about, now that the 3 core books of 2024 D&D are out, what happens now, and our initial thoughts on the full system. We are going to also talk about, everybody knows that Orcs and Drow were removed. We're going to talk about possible solution for that coming up later on the show, and as always, we will get to the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. We're currently doing Chapter 2. Okay, so let's start off with Nacho Man has his cornflakes. Hey, Nacho, good thing. Good thing. Be sure to eat your Wheaties. All right, so now we are going to do, let me share here. Is that right? So a couple weeks ago, I was looking on social media, and I learned that Brad has tattoo sleeves on his arms. I learned this from, I've known Brad for like a year. I've never met him in person, but I've known Brad for a year. I didn't know he had sleeves. I had no idea. So here's what we're going to do. I have 8 scientifically chosen kind of yes or no or simple answer questions that will definitively determine someone's personality. So we're going to go through these 8 questions, lightning round, and we're all going to get to know each other. Question number 1. Shoes by the front door, wear shoes inside.
Shoes by the front door.
Front door?
Hey.
Yeah, take shoes off. Yeah, only monsters wear their shoes inside all the time.
I very recently acquired inside shoes.
I also have...
Basement is cold. That's exactly how old I am. I now have inside shoes.
I have inside shoes as well. Okay, question number 2. Pineapple on pizza, yes, no?
Yes.
It's fine. People make too much of a deal about it, but absolutely not. Get out of here. That's like my 12th favorite topping. And if it's in there, that's all you taste.
It's one of my favorites. You got to put it with something spicy, though, like pepperoni and some red pepper flakes or something.
I say no. It makes the pizza too watery. Pineapple sweat. Worst TV show you watch? I'll go first. The Bachelor.
I don't watch anything that bad. Jeez.
I said we had to get the segment done before my wife comes home. Whatever my wife is watching. So, I mean, we do watch a lot of high premiere television, but we also watch a lot of schlock reality TV. Love is Blind is the new favorite.
Yep, that's a bad one.
That's a bad one. I've watched like pieces of 8 countries worth of Love is Blind.
I cannot do the reality TV stuff. Probably worst show I've watched, and my excuse is I watch it with my wife, is Emily in Paris.
Okay. All right. Mustard or mayonnaise?
Ooh, never mayonnaise.
I need context.
Nope. Mustard or mayonnaise?
Honey mustard
Okay. I vote mayonnaise.
mixed with mayonnaise for French fries.
Boxers or briefs?
Boxers.
Both boxer briefs.
Yeah, briefs technically, I guess. Yeah.
Boxer. I vote boxers. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Yes, no.
I mean, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say yes because it creates a whole very fun theoretical framework
Okay.
where like tacos are sandwiches and ravioli, maybe.
Ooh, ravioli, maybe? I don't know.
I say a hot dog is not a sandwich. Matrix or The Fifth Element?
Oh, like if we want to talk like quality, I'm going Matrix. Is like this, but just fun rewatchability. Fifth Element.
Multipass.
I vote Matrix. All right, there we go. Now we know each other inside and out. It has been established.
I think we're not compatible. Is that what we came down to?
Yeah, we have been determined to be not compatible. All right, let me make sure I got the right screen share up here.
And technically, the sleeves thing, I basically have two half sleeves. So I have a tattoo on my left arm that goes up the forearm. That's what you saw in that picture. And then I have a tattoo that starts on the shoulder and goes halfway down this arm. So my sleeves are not finished.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be 4 dragons, but the artist drew 2 of them, and I said, like, well, I want that one on this side and that one on this side, and then he moved away, and we never finished. So, yeah.
So let's talk about tabletop role-playing game stuff. First up, I found this on EN World that Kobold Press is coming out with a new game called Riverbank role-playing game, and it looks very cute. And the main reason this is coming to backer kit, and so we don't know any of the rules or anything about it yet, but from some familiarity with games like Mouse Guard and Mouse Ritter, Humblewood, this seems to be along those same kind of lines. And I wanted to talk about this, not this game specifically, but I'm always very interested in games that have social mechanics. I'm interested in games where there's little or no combat that have social mechanics because I feel like that's one area where so many combat-focused role-playing games fall short, is that the social aspects are hand-waved or reduced to a simple check. Where I think if D&D and Shadow Dark and other games had more kinds of social mechanics, I think you might see more balanced kind of role play. Whereas I feel like at a lot of tables, you know that there's a percentage of role play you're going to get at that table. And people prone to role play, people prone to not role playing don't and are leaning toward the combat. But if you have more social kinds of rules, more ways to gamify the social aspect. Like if you look at Blades in the Dark's downtime is very gamified. And I think it makes it really fun because downtime is not this nebulous thing of, well, crap, I guess maybe I could craft something or I'll carouse or I don't know, I'll go pray at the temple for a month. Like it's very nebulous in D&D, and I wish there were more structure for the unstructured parts of the game. That's one thing I liked about Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I like some of there are emotional mechanics in the game. There are ways that you can buff and debuff people emotionally. It's very interesting. And I've always been curious about games that have those sorts of social mechanics. Do you guys have thoughts on that or any really good recommendations? Chat, let us know.
I haven't played a lot of games with the social mechanics. Like all the games you just named are like on my short list of games I want to play, but I haven't actually played any of those. I guess some of the Powered by the Apocalypse games have some social mechanics. But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with social mechanics because I've, been pretty much an old school D&D nerd for so long that all the games I've pretty much all the games I've played over the years have been pretty combat focused, right? So, but to your point, one of the arguments, right, that you don't need social mechanics, right, is that you have freedom then to role play however you want to role play. But that seems like an excuse to me. Like, I think that's kind of an excuse to dismiss the social mechanics. Because the flip side of that would be, well, you can take an all social game and you can run any combat you want in a social game because there are no combat mechanics, so you can do whatever you want. Like that the opposite logic kind of disproves, the original point, right?
Yeah, no, there was an interview with Brennan Lee Mulligan a couple years ago when they were starting that new podcast, Worlds Without Number, Worlds Beyond Everything, whatever it is. And I don't remember if they asked him in the interview or if he was talking about, he said something about how he gets lots of comments about people say, why are you playing D&D 5e in these podcasts, because they're extremely narrative and you don't, there's very little combat. Why don't you play one of the more narrative kinds of role-playing games? And his answer was, look, I know how to do interpersonal drama. What I don't know is how fast an arrow flies through space and the likelihood percentage an arrow is good to hit a target at 35 feet. That's what I need the mechanics for. He said he didn't need the social mechanics. And I kind of find that interesting, that if you played a game with more social mechanics, Brendan Lee Mulligan they'd say that hampers him. But for other people, having social mechanics might spur kinds of creativity. Because like one of the things in Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and lots of games do this, but it has that kind of like inter-party bond thing where you have to have a type of bond with one other member of the party and a different type of bond with another member of the party. And those sorts of guardrails spur roleplay between the characters. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, and I think there's at least two ways that I can think of that you could put mechanics in the game that would spur storytelling, right? One is what you just described, like with the bond mechanics in 30 Sword Lesbians, where you can, generate connection between the PCs. Another way would is kind of more, I guess, kind of more like, I'm drawing a blank on it now. The one you mentioned earlier, the heist game, Blades in the Dark.
Blades in the Dark.
Yeah. Where Blades in the Dark kind of has like steps, like downtime steps that you follow, right? And that's a little bit different, right? Because it's still prescriptive, and it gives the game master a framework to run out of combat scenarios. So you could do it where there's mechanics that promote the social interaction, or you could do it with mechanics that promote what do we do when we get out of combat. So kind of like Shadow Dark in their carousing that we talked about last week or week before, whenever that was.
Yeah, I think different strokes for different folks is what it's always like the baseline that I come back to, where it's like, okay, I have this long history and skill set developed as an improvisational actor. Okay, yeah, maybe I don't need a rule set, right? If we're going to incorporate D&D into our fencing club, yeah, maybe we need fewer combat rules because we're going to figure this out on the mats. I don't know enough about fencing to continue that metaphor. But I think a lot of social like rule implementation is on the player side, and you have these skills you can use, these buttons you can push, these actions you can take, and that's half the equation in combat. I think the missing piece to a lot of systems, social mechanics, is you need the other side. You need the bar. You need the hit points that are going down or the experience that's going up. You have, I'm always doing on my side of the Dungeon Master screen, like faction relational play, whether or not that's like systematized and numbered or just more abstract. Like those are the relationships that are going to have mechanical and narrative impacts in the game. You do something for me, I'm going to do something for you. Hey, now you have discounted magic items, access to magic items in the first place, people who have your back, resources and knowledge. That's the prestige, I want to say, was an alternative rule in the old DMG. I think it was prestige, where you had like points that you're developing with factions. That's why I was always kind of like disappointed that Forgotten Realms never like, here's 5 factions. They have flags, and they never really like took that anywhere other than like, you have a title. Like, I think that's the underdeveloped part of the game. I don't need to be able to push +5 to my persuasion. It's nice for people who don't want to try to be persuasive to have a button to push, right? I'm not going to make the fighter do an athletics check in real life, like, oh, you want to move that box, hit the gym. How much can you lift here? So like, yeah, some people want that button. I don't want the button. I want a mechanic for the result over time tracking. I want an HP bar for social play. I want an experience bar for social play.
Yeah, I think Renowned is what they called it.
Renowned, thank you.
Yeah. And then they expanded upon that in the Theros book with the religious version, right? I forget what they called it in Theros. Fred makes a good point. The people don't necessarily need a mechanic to do things that they do every day. Like we communicate every day. We talk and have arguments with people or have drama, on a daily basis. So that's one argument in the camp of like, do you really need that much social mechanics, right? Or that many social mechanics?
Yeah, and it might be easier to do specifically structured downtime in Blades in the Dark than Dungeons and Dragons, because everyone in Blades in the Dark is kind of the same type of PC. Everyone has the same kind of goal. It's all goal based around what do they call it? The crew, a group of scoundrels, a crew. It's all crew focused, so you're all going to be doing the same kind of stuff. But D&D parties can vary so widely that it's hard to have one specific set of downtime activities that could speak to every different type of class and style.
But there are different like vices in Blades, and you have the health bar, right? You have these stress bubbles that are filling up, and you have to reduce them. There's a mechanic there. It's a currency you have to spend, and okay, that one's detrimental to you. But like the most successful campaign I ran, downtime wise, was like, all right, every week you have a week of downtime, right? It's just like I had the game going in real time, more or less. That's looks better on paper than it does in practice. But you have downtime, you should spend it. Not just like, okay, we're all going to sit here and discuss, like, are we going to play the game or are we going to play this poorly developed minigame? It's like, nope, you have a week of downtime. Tell me between sessions what you're doing with it. Here's the currency to spend. That's the part that I feel doesn't get enough attention to it. You need the other side of the equation, not just like what the player's going to do, but like what's the consequence of it? Why do they care in the first place? How is it integrated into the rest of the game?
Yeah, I think if I was going to design some sort of out of combat mechanic, it would be more storytelling based than it would be interpersonal based, right? So I guess leaning more towards like the Blades in the Dark versus the Thirsty Sword Lesbians approach, right? Where it's more like during this downtime, establish a new plot hook, interact with a faction, determine the positive or negative consequences for interacting with that faction. Like some sort of step-by-step process for the game master to introduce social encounters that accomplish those kind of tasks in order to keep the story moving forward.
So, any other thoughts on social mechanics? We're ready to move on.
I like carousing. I like XP. I like
doesn't?
gold for XP. Yeah, I like. Okay, you had like this like Conan fantasy of like you went to the dungeon, you got all the gold, you go back to town, you need to blow all of this in order to level up. Now I have some downtime built in. Now it's like, oh, you got drunk and complications arose, and now you're on the hook for some other plot. And this, some weird way explains the time for you to like have upgraded your skills. You didn't just like sleep on it. It's like, okay, you spent a couple weeks in town, you got drunk, you went to the dojo, you trained up. Here we go, level 2.
And coming up very soon, Baldur's Gate 3 is getting another huge patch, which is interesting because it was like 6 months ago that Larian said they weren't doing anything else for Baldur's Gate 3. This one was probably still in the chamber at that time. They're releasing a bunch of new subclasses, and I don't know how much we need to discuss this, but I wanted to bring it up because I just completed a Baldur's Gate 3 run about a week ago, 4 or 5 days ago, and it was only this week. I finally did an evil run through. It was morally difficult at first to do things like slaughter the tieflings, but then by the end of the game, I embraced my role as evil incarnate, and it was glorious. But if you haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, if you played it maybe when it came out in 2023, in a couple more months, it's going to have a bunch of new subclasses. And so, I don't know. I've played this game. I've played Baldur's Gate 3 all the way through, I think, 4 times. And I still find brand new stuff. I found probably about half of what I did this time was completely new, which is amazing. It's amazing to put 400 hours into a video game and find new stuff. That's quite a game.
To be honest, that is why I've stayed away from it. I don't know if I've spent those 400 hours well, but at least I kept them I kept them away. I know that game would own me. Like I would not
It's
be
so good, Ryan. You should play it.
sleeping
It's
or
so good.
showering.
It's Dungeons and Dragons, but with a controller in your hand. It's amazing.
I see the appeal.
Anyway, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Brad, or should we just move on?
On Baldur's Gate, yeah, I'm with Ryan. I have resisted the temptation to get into it because I know I love the first 2, but I still have too many kids in the house. My life is way too busy to make time for video games, unfortunately.
Oof, man, it's so good. You guys don't know what you're missing out on. All right. So the next thing that we are, whoops, where did that go? Oh no.
Panic.
I got the wrong thing. Stand by. Talk amongst yourselves.
Hey everybody,
that.
we're the Landlocked Warlocks, and you should be subscribed to us, because if you're not, you're missing out on an awesome chat. Sometimes I have a hard time participating in our conversation, because your conversation is dope. Go to Landlocked Warlocks, everyone.
Thank you, Ryan. So moving on, they keep putting out new updates for maps, which is surprising because it seems like they would want to invest all of this fancy development time into Project Sigil. But maps is still coming on strong. They're getting more and more closer to the reality, to my idea that they're probably going to sunset encounters. Specifically because now in maps, you can click on a token to bring up the stat block. You could filter legacy or new content, specific books. You can click on a token. I don't know. I think that's in a different image. So you can click on a token and edit the hit points. Oh, yeah, there it is. Heal and damage at temp HP directly from the token. So really the only thing missing here is the filters for building encounters. There's still no way to create an encounter and save it. You can throw tokens on a map, which is kind of similar, but Have you guys taken any trips through maps lately? I looked at it a few weeks ago before they added some of this stuff.
I have not, um, but I don't play online, so that's me. I'm the old man of the group.
I,
Phil, Project Sigil, it's the 3D map that looks
I think
basically
Phil's
like Baldur's
confused
Gate.
because you're saying it wrong.
Am I saying it wrong, Phil?
Sigil. It's a G, like GIF.
I will not say guh. I will not say Sigil.
Nerd fight. It's a Sibboleth. I run an online game. I run two games, one of which is online because it allows me to connect to friends who I would not be able to connect to otherwise because of geography. And I love that aspect of it. I run a pretty lo-fi game. I still use Owlbear Rodeo. I don't use a lot of the newer things. I like the fact that it's I run as close to the equivalent of like just moving a mini on top of a two-dimensional map. I don't want the thing to do math for me. I like what makes D&D not like a video game, and I find the deeper into a complex VTT I go, the the more that goes away and the more mental bandwidth I spend on like it's funny. It doesn't like taking the math away from me doesn't clear up brain power for me. It actually just like more cognitive reckoning is happening in my computer, not in me. Like I'm better off rendering this stuff than surrendering that to a computer program. My personal preference. I'm not saying VTTs are bad or evil. I am a little concerned about well, WotC's being the one to rule them all. But just my own personal preference. I like a less is more approach.
I agree. Albert is the best one. It's my favorite.
And like I played on Foundry, and like as a player, experimenting with new systems, perhaps it's been nice because it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna push the button. I don't need to like reason. To a degree, that's nice as like an introductory thing. And like there's people diehard fans of Roll20, and I get it. It's just for me the appeal is more of this exists in our imagination collectively, not somewhere externally behind some sort of CPU.
You know, I've played hundreds and hundreds of hours in Roll20, and I've played, I think, 5 or 6 sessions in Foundry. And of those 5 or 6 sessions, at least 2 of them were marred by technical issues that we had like big breaks in the session because of technical issues. Because Foundry has so many plugins you can put into it. It was described to me as Roll20 plus plus, and there was both of these times the person running the session had to disable like all of their plugins and
Mm.
reload, and it took like an hour. And one thing Foundry does is there's a plugin where you can see people's mouses are. So if somebody moves their mouse, you see it on the screen. Just horrible confusion, hyperactivity, watching people's cursors go over the screen. I'm like, I can't pay attention. I'm just watching people's mouses move. Why aren't they're not listening either? They're clicking with their mouses. Very, very difficult. I did not like Foundry.
Yeah, I recently got to play online as a player, and and that was cool. I think we were using Owlbear, and I had the experience that Ryan was describing. Right, the VTT didn't get in the way. It facilitated gameplay. I was also playing with other YouTube creators, so there was a lot of good role play going on, and um, so mm, that kept me engaged in from a role play character perspective, and I was fine with that. I'm with you, Ryan. I don't want a whole bunch of bells and whistles, and I don't want to feel like I'm playing a video game.
This is interesting. Elder Goblin Game says Index Card RPG has a VTT. I didn't know that, but I am a huge fan of Index Card RPG. That's one of the most innovative RPGs I've ever read.
Mhm.
So if that guy made a VTT, I would be very interested to check that out. Do you know about it, Brad?
I've messed around with it a little bit. It seems very simple and streamlined. Um, it's that's about all I know. Is like I just played around with it. I haven't actually run the game or played in the game using it. Um, but yeah, uh, it's pretty straightforward. It's not complex. So I would say uh, it's probably at least it seems to me similar to Owlbear Rodeo, when Owlbear Rodeo was still its like basic form before it evolved like a Pokemon.
Owlbear 1.0 was a lot different. It was much more simple.
Yeah.
I recently ran a game where I did a screen share of Owlbear Rodeo for these jabronis, and I was moving the tokens. A couple people were like signed in, but like it was mostly we were using a VTT, but like not quite as a VTT. It was interesting. It's the first time I've actually done it that way. But stay tuned for the Waking of Willoughby Hall, everybody.
Yeah, coming up in about 60 minutes. 60 minutes from now, that will be debuting. So I guess we could go ahead and move along one of the our roundtable discussion 1 sub A. We're gonna talk a little bit about monster layers. There's this new article on D&D Beyond about monster layers, and they have some advice here that's kind of pulled out of, I think, mostly out of the Dungeon Master's Guide about regional effects and local effects. And speaking of Baldur's Gate, there are some of the battles in Baldur's Gate where lair effects are incredibly important. Like in late in the game, you have a chance to go down into the hells and fight a devil. And he has in this room, there's these 4 giant towers, and each of the towers adds damage to his attacks, adds to his AC, adds to his saving throws. So if you destroy the towers, he's much easier to combat. And so stuff like that, I feel like, is really interesting in games, and especially at high levels, you need good lair effects to also challenge the players. I feel like in the high level D&D campaign I'm playing in, pretty much every monster we fight has some kind of lair effect on initiative count 20. More recently, there was we were fighting a drow princess, drow queen of Lolth or something like that, and there were these massive towers in the pillars around the room, and we were suffering bludgeoning damage from like a meteor storm every round until we figured out that the power was coming from these towers. We destroyed the towers and then nullified the lair effects. So I really like lair effects as sort of an additional kind of puzzle, that gives the PC something just beyond draining the bag of hit points. And what do you guys want to say about layers? Do we want to build one? How do we want to do this?
I think we can take an approach to layers and build off of what we talked about last week about building monsters, right? One of the things we said about building monsters last week, or a few of the things we said about building monsters last week, is that there should be a story to the monster, right? Like this collaborative storytelling game, right? We want to tell a story. We also want the monster to ask questions, right? You want the monster to challenge the players in a way where the monster or the players need to decide, how am I going to respond to this thing the monster just did, right? The monster asks the players a question, and then the players have to decide, all right, well, am I going to try to escape from its grapple? Am I going to try to just attack it even though I have disadvantage because I'm grappled, right? That's a very simple example of the monster asking the player a question, right? And I think the layer should be an extension of that. The layer should be an extension of the monster. So the layer can help you tell the story. It can help you set the tone. It can also ask additional questions, right? What do I have to do to get through this layer? Are there on and off switches that I need to operate in order to make it easier to defeat this monster, right? Those kind of things are ways to think about game design in your layer.
I really like kind of flipping the switch a little bit, and like you have this. All right, how am I going to make this room where the monster is interesting? right? We're gonna have this set piece battle in the final room of this map, but like the lair is the whole thing, right? So like it's a lot easier for me to conceptualize a lot of more interesting ideas. Is the 5-room dungeon is the monster's lair. He's chilling in his front parlor. You walk in, he shoots you and runs and starts setting traps for you to follow him deeper and deeper and deeper. And even if that is one big, stadium-sized space and not doors and hallways, just like conceptually creating like a point crawl, however you want to like work it in your mind, having multiple things, not just like, okay, this is everything at once. Typically, like a good layer action is a couple things, right? It can be cool. Okay, this is falling from the sky until you stop this thing. Now it's a puzzle. But I like, round 2, round 20, something else happens. Like, whoa, I didn't know that was coming. Now it's like, now the floor is lava and this thing is falling on you. What do you do? Like, I like that cumulative effect. Just like waves of impact.
Yeah. And we know that
Yeah.
WotC has kind of gotten rid of the regional effects and the layer actions specifically, and all they've done, and they've streamlined it by adding more legendary actions when you're in your layer. But they haven't completely done away with regional effects, because I was actually looking at some monsters to get ready for this segment, and the Mummy Lord does have a couple of what we used to call layer actions. If you go all the way down to the bottom of the new Mummy Lord, right? There's the Cursed Fate ability and the Soul Drain ability. So the Soul Drain, within a mile of the layer, you have disadvantage on death saves. Like that's pretty nasty. And that's a cool regional effect that foreshadows your monster. Talking about telling a story, right? Kind of foreshadow your monster by having this regional effect. And then it becomes, well, we need to deal with this because this is bad, right? That's disadvantage on death saves, especially if it's a mystery at first. We don't know what's causing this, right? And then the players go searching to find that. That helps you tell a story. That's a mechanic that is going to help you tell a story, and I think that's good design.
A fun hook would be someone got a very simple cut on their leg and died 20 minutes later. Anyone who gets any kind of injury passes out and is very likely to die in this town. And this has only just happened in the last couple of years. That would be an interesting mystery to crack. Why are people dying so easily? Why is everyone in this town a hemophiliac all of a sudden?
I like boss monsters that break the rules of the game or like readjust the rules of the game, right? Like this thing from another dimension is here, and now any spell you cast, we're rolling on the wild magic table. Until you get rid of this thing, all of your abilities function different here. This thing from the Shadow Realm is sucking the life and the color out of the world, and like there's no healing. There's no healing until you get the hell out of here or deal with this thing.
Right, and they did that with Tomb of Annihilation, right? Like there was the curse that prevented resurrection, right? And that was a way to kind of up the stakes in that setting, right? Those are all things you can do, whether you call it a curse or you call it a regional effect, or however you design it mechanically. But I think the goal is to tell a good story, and and all the things that go into that, like foreshadowing, mystery, answering those questions. What is going on with this monster that's causing this impact, right? That's all good design. And then, like Ryan, like you're saying, like that puzzle, like how do we turn this off, right? Like one of the Mummy Lord's abilities, it it gives advantage to undead on their saves versus turn undead, right? So you can actually have an orb in the layer. The players, if they find the orb and they smash this orb, right, then that turns off that ability, right? So that's a switch they can throw that makes encounters from that point forward easier, because now the whatever else is in that layer, the ghouls, the shadows, whatever, they're no longer resistant to turn undead.
I love stuff like that. And like, quick, hey, Dungeon Master, is there some dope magic item in the pile behind the boss monster? Why aren't they using that? Why don't they tell? There's a sphere of annihilation back there. They get a minion to activate it. Like, it's not just sitting there inert for the players to loot. Make the players feel like they're earning it. Be like, whoa, I want to kill that. Like, it incentivizes them to go get it. But yeah, there's some magical weapon that is not on. Like, the hobgoblin drops it, but he's not using it against the players the whole time. Nah, nah. And then you can get good stories where, like, where the hell did this goblin get a wand of magic missiles? Like, this doesn't make sense. I don't even know if he's pointing it in the right direction. What's happening here?
Another creature that gets a lair in 2024 is the Aboleth. This is one of my favorite monsters because the lair says that water sources within 1 mile of the lair are supernaturally fouled. I discovered this in a campaign I was playing in. We were traveling on a river, and then it was just like all of a sudden the river was fouled and it was poisonous, and then all the green grass turned to decay, and then we had to figure out what was causing it. So that's another good way to telegraph when the terrain, the climate is changed because of the lair as a clue of what's coming up.
Yeah. Well, and that can impact, how the players interact with PCs too, right? I had an archmage big boss who kept using control weather to damage the crops, and so people were going hungry, and everything in town cost more. Like, basically, the townsfolk were suffering from inflation because there was a lack of food and there was a breakdown in supply chain, because this was all, I did this campaign long before the pandemic and all that sort of stuff.
Too soon.
Before we had to experience it in real life, right? But it was, it set a tone for the campaign. It set a more grim, dark tone, because every town they went into, the people were disgruntled and unhappy, and players are trying to buy their gear, but everything was more expensive, right? And so it started with this tone. They really hated this archmage. They really wanted to get rid of this guy because they had never met him, right? But they saw the effects that he was having on the world around them, and that was making their life more difficult.
Yeah, I always like hitting their resources that they care about. Like, you want the players to go down in the mine where the dwarves delved too deeply and hit the Underdark or whatever. Like, this is the premise of my level 1 adventure on the DM's Guild. You want them to go to the mine. Hey, there's no weapons there's no iron. Like, we can't get iron. You can't get studded leather armor until you go deal with this situation. And, like, hey, maybe I'll give you a discount if you cure this problem for us. But, like, right now, like, no, there are no upgrades. You want healing potions? The herbalist has disappeared into the dark wood. Like, you got to go find her before you get access to. I don't care if you have 50 gold. There are no healing potions to buy because the person who's making them got. Go get her. Save the day. Be heroes.
Save the day. All right. Do we want to say more about lairs, or are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Wait a second, Brad, you're muted.
Sorry. I was gonna plug Peter's new video from Tales of Elsewhere, because he was just on our show last week, right? And he just dropped a video, I think it was today, where he talks about combat design, right? And he establishes a three round rhythm. It's a really great video. Check it out, where he talks about how to design combat in these 3 steps. And you could take that and extrapolate that out to the whole layer, right? So that you're basically, if you view the layer as an extension of the monster, right? That as you're moving through the dungeon, you are continuing to engage in these same 3 steps over and over again, because it's really just one long proactive combat against the monster, right? That you're fighting the layer, you're fighting the layer, you're fighting the layer, and then you're fighting the monster, right? And then the monster can do something where they move from one part of the layer to the other, right? And now you've stretched it out even more, right?
That's the difference between like okay design and like great design, is that cohesiveness, that integration. Like the second the monster goes from like, this monster occupies this room, it's going to fight you in this room, to like, this monster's smart enough to know that his buddy's in the next room, and you took out half of their number, and this guy turns and runs, and you can hear him screaming. Maybe you don't even speak his language, but you understand in the tone. Like my players experienced this yesterday and were pissed. I was like, this is what would happen. This is what this is what would happen. They broke ranks. And now you know it's like you're not out of combat. You have a round to prepare an action maybe, but you there's another wave coming. You know it's coming. You can go meet them or set a trap for them or even retreat tactically. And now it's much more dynamic. This fight is happening in 3 rooms, the whole dungeon, not just like this little 30-foot by 30-foot square.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do is like a lot of the big bad monsters have recharge abilities, like your dragon breath. So like, so what if you had a red dragon in its lair, and there's these lava pools throughout the lair, and so the red dragon, if it takes off and moves from one room to the other, if it dives into one of these lava pools, that's going to recharge its fire breath, right? So now you've created an encounter where the players have to decide, are we going to keep letting this thing go recharge its breath faster than usual? How can we contain it in one room, right? So there's ways to make your layer actions, your legendary actions, hit dramatic beats that keep the combat interesting.
Mm-hmm. All right, anything else? We ready to move on to, wait for it, the roundtable discussion. You forgot we had graphics. We got graphics. Hot take.
Gradually becoming less and less casual as we.
You are the cave. Pull an Empire Strikes Back on them. Remember, they flew into the. They flew the stuff on the asteroid, but it wasn't an asteroid. Anyway,
they do that in Shattered Obelisk. I think I did it better. I made it better, but it's in the bones are in there. Like that that encounter's in there. It's fucking great. Like, oh no, it's not. You think you're in a cave mouth, but it's a regular mouth.
Now that, as of 3 days ago, all 3 of the 2024 core books of D&D 5.5 are out. And so what do we think about them? I think they are beautiful books. I'm glad that they are all out now so that the rolling cutover can begin. You know, the benefit of a hard edition change is that you know what's canon and what's legacy. With 5.5, it's all a rolling cutover, so some things are more compatible than others in a kind of very Orwellian fashion. I think the books do a lot right. I think that all our conversations in September about, well, we're just gonna have to wait and see when the Monster Manual comes out if they beefed it up. I feel like, I mean, I'm not playing 5.5 right now, but from what I've seen, it looks more balanced than we were afraid it wouldn't be. What do you guys think about the future of the future of 5.5 and the 3 books and the state of Dungeons and Dragons right now? And chat, let us know what you think.
Yeah, I have thoughts, but I want to hear from chat. Like, what's everybody doing at their tables, right? Like, a lot of people were waiting for everything to be out and or waiting for their campaign for a natural point to change. Like, what is everybody doing next, right? If you haven't changed over now, if you're doing a new thing now or you're about to start a new thing, like, I am very curious because there's a lot of cool people in chat. I want to know what you're doing next. I will say my tepid take is it's fine. It's fine. They've made a lot of things better. A lot of the things that got me hyped for like, oh, this is going to be a cool new thing that they added are a little underbaked, right? I wanted downtime bastions. Not there. Monsters, a little bit better. Player character so far, pretty balanced. I'm not warning new players off of particular subclasses because they're traps. I would have preferred a brand new system, straight up, than half a system, than a revision that we didn't need because they wanted to not stop selling everything. But for me, I've been playing 5e through the transition. Both of my tables now, with one exception, are complete. Like my one campaign is all new PHB 2024 characters only. No additional stuff from like Xanathar's or Tasha's. My other table, I've been running a 2014 Paladin with mostly new characters who can use old stuff. And that is a little bit jankier. When there's two versions of the same spell going off, it creates a lot of confusion. And it almost like naturally gets you to a place where like, nope, this is the version I like better. This is the version I like better. So like, I'm already, as much as I want to play rules as intended or rules as written before I start making those choices, I can't help myself. I'm already like, nope, I like the old grapple rules. We're using the 2014 grapple rules at my table for this campaign, the 2024 version of the effect of being grappled. But yeah, it has been confusing for me to not only the rolling transition, but the fact that it didn't change too much. It would be much easier for me to play an entirely different game than to figure out what is slightly different about the game I'm playing now.
Yeah, I like most everything about the new edition. Like I like it. It's a good game. I can nitpick it, but overall I think it's a solid version of D&D. And I'm kind of, with Ryan on this one too. Like I would have preferred a whole new edition, like something fresh, something because but of course I've been playing 5e since it came out. Like I started monkeying around with it during the D&D Next playtest and started playing as soon as the new books came out. So I've got a full 10 years playing 5e. So I'm ready for something new. But I can't really knock this version. It's a good version. It's just probably not what I'm gonna play indefinitely, right? I'm not gonna. I highly doubt that I'm gonna play 5.5 for another 10 years. Like that's not gonna happen. Because I've already played 5th edition for 10 years. I'm not gonna spend even 5 years playing this version. I'm committed because I plan my campaigns 1 year at a time. So I'm committed to playing 2024 for this year. But after that, I'm probably moving on to something different.
Yeah, the one 5e campaign I'm in, we're at the end, very near the end of a 3-year campaign. We are all 18th level. There's not much left to do. And we've mostly been staying with the 5e rules, but we have onboarded some more and more 5.5 rules, and we had one player who played a side character for a couple sessions that was a fully new 5.5 barbarian that was way overpowered compared to the rest of us. We were all like jaws on the floor with that PC. But I don't really feel very interested. I'm kind of with Brad. I'm not that interested in Dungeons and Dragons anymore. If it's not going to be different and new. I'm much more interested in waiting till Daggerheart comes out to run that. The final version of that comes out in May. I'm pretty excited for that. And dipping my toes into other things like DC-20 and Mothership. Those are the games I'm interested in playing this year. But I still have to know about Dungeons and Dragons because I'm a tabletop YouTuber, so I can't not talk about Dungeons and Dragons. So there will be more Dungeons and Dragons in the future. I know that.
Yeah. Well, and we recently got to play Nimble with Twin Steel. And that's a great game. Like I could definitely see myself playing more of that. Go check that out. But yeah. Did you guys hear that Mike Merles is working on a game of his own?
I've heard that it's for his Patreon, right?
Yeah. So
I think.
if you're part of his Patreon, you can get access to the new game he's working on. I'm drawing a blank on the name because I wasn't prepared to talk about it specifically. But yeah, I mean, I can see myself, playing some other games after this year, or designing my own game. Like I'm really looking for something that's going to hit the sweet spot for me and my players. That's really between 5e and Shadow Dark. I want something like more streamlined, but not as streamlined as Shadow Dark. I want more player options, a little more crunch. I want to find that kind of middle ground.
Yeah, I'm really looking for rules medium systems that have enough crunch that I can run satisfying combat and multi-level progression. That's also important, but rules light enough that I can homebrew my own things wherever I want. That's really what I'm looking for. Something with good established rules, but room for me to add in my own subsystems. Because I've added subsystems into 5e over the years, and most of the time they're too complicated. Because 5e is already so complicated. Anytime someone is like, here's a fantasy sports game, the rules fit on 2 pages. If there's more than like 3 or 4 rules for your 5e subsystem, I ain't doing it. 5e's already complex enough.
Yeah. The other thing too is I also run games for kids. So I've already stripped down 5e to like a kid friendly version that I use. So there's got to be some space in there in between. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, it's very much entrenched in the culture that either you play D&D or everything else. And it's so bizarre to me that it's like, right now I want to play 5.5 and experiment with a million other games. There's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon. I really like Nimble. We did a mini mothership campaign at the end of last year, and like, oh boy, that was amazing. Like, I like the variety, and it's so perplexing to me. And like, I don't know, I spend hours giving other people advice about like how to navigate D&D and such. Like, I still struggle to get people to play a different game. And essentially put my foot down a couple of years ago. I was like, "Nah, we're playing other games. I'm gonna let you guys choose." And we went into Old School Essentials at one group. We went into Pathfinder in another group, and it was amazing. And then everyone's like, "Can we play D&D again?" This is like, okay, I guess, but like, why? What is the what is this? I understand it's the 500-pound gorilla, but like, there's so many easier games to learn. There's so many more like focused on a particular vibe game. It's very interesting to me if it's just like propaganda or marketing or what. It's just I don't know. Do
Internet
you guys have an answer?
groupthink.
Right? Is that I think that's what it is, but
I think this is my perception is that the community, right, has divided into these two camps, right? There does seem to be still a large chunk of people who are very loyal to D&D, whether within that camp it's still divided because you got people who are 3.5 loyalist and Pathfinder 2 and first edition, right? But it's still all D&D, right? It's all just variants of the same thing. Even Shadow Dark is still a 5e variant, right? So there's folks that have their version of D&D that they play. And then you have this other group of folks who are like, no, we play everything but that. And those seem to be the two largest camps, right? Like that's what I hear you saying, Ryan. And I think there's just like some internet group think that just drives that and makes that happen. Like, I mean, my channel, a lot of my original videos, I'm talking about all versions of D&D. Like I'm talking about first edition, I'm talking about Shadow Dark, I'm talking about OSR stuff. And it seemed to be almost divisive to my audience. Like, so I get a whole bunch of people following my channel, but then folks who are big Shadow Dark fans are making negative comments on my D&D videos, and folks, who are 5e fans are making negative comments on my OSR videos. It's like, I don't get this, like this mentality that you have to be so loyal to one version of D&D, right?
I think
that's what it is.
I think it's tribalism, and it's just like, there's like other, human endeavors that are affected negatively by this as well. But yeah, it's a bummer, and it's so weird that it's like D&D or not D&D, because I feel like that puts like people in the D&D camp are afraid to cross the line because it's like framed as either you play Dungeons and Dragons or you're never going to play D&D again because it's bad. And it's like an oversimplification, and I think it's stopping people from crossing that boundary. It's actually like counterproductive to the people who want D&D people to like come try their cool thing too.
Yeah. And I grew up playing all sorts of games, right? Like growing up, obviously we played a lot of D&D, but we also played Traveler and Marvel Superheroes and Top Secret. And most of those games were made by TSR, right? But but we were playing all these different games. Shadowrun, we played a whole bunch of different games growing up, and I don't remember there being, of course, there was no real internet back then, but I don't remember the hobby being like, no, you shouldn't play this one, you shouldn't play that one, right? Everybody was like, oh yeah, check this one out. And there's always something new to play.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I watched my older brother play Dungeons and Dragons. He and his friends started with D&D, and then they were on to Star Frontiers and the 007 game and Top Secret, and they were playing. He had all kinds of games, and I only saw them play D&D once or twice, and then they were on to other things. So it's always been a big divide. I don't think we're going to solve tribalism here on the show today, but I do have a related discussion question, I think. So the 3 core books are out now. WotC, I'm pretty sure I remember Jeremy Crawford or Chris Perkins saying something in a video to the effect of, this is the last edition of D&D. Something to that effect of like, we're not, 5th edition is it. This is Dungeons and Dragons for the rest of time. And I want to ask you guys, do you think that's true? Will there be a 6th edition?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. Because at some point, right, there's going to be changes. Something's going to happen. The popularity of D&D is going to fade, right? We've seen it happen in the past. History repeats itself. WotC seems to be really good at repeating the bad parts of their own history. So I'm sure at some point there'll be a new edition of D&D, like an overhaul. It's inevitable.
Brian, what you think?
I think that's him saying this is the last version of D&D I'm going to make. Because eventually all of the people saying that will have been rotated out. Love them or hate them. Like, eventually it's going to be a new group of people looking at quarterly profit projections. They can't do this trick again. I mean, maybe they can try, but like, there's no, like, this barely worked. I mean, I guess the jury's still out, but I think like they've sold a lot of books, right? In the last few months, like, they're doing okay. But the idea of like, here's a new edition, but it's not new, but it is, but it's not, like, I don't know. Can they do that every 10 years? I really don't think so.
Well, I think the parenthetical that got left out of that quote was something like, hopefully this edition sells well enough that we will never make another D&D edition again. And I don't know. I mean, yeah, from what I hear, the sales numbers are pretty good, but it's not explosive. It's not like I'm sure they were hoping that this was going to be as popular again as 2014 was when that happened. Between 2014 and 2016 when the books came out and then Stranger Things happened. And as far as I know, there's not been an explosion like that in sales and a huge influx of new. This edition isn't bringing in new people, is what I'm getting at. And then I would reckon most of these sales are to people who already played Dungeons and Dragons and already own the 2014 books.
Yeah.
And
And
you know, maybe that's enough of a sales strategy. If we get everyone to buy new books, that's still millions and millions of dollars. Because before they were only selling new books to new players, because everybody who bought their book between 2014 and 2023 had already bought the book, right? They already bought the core books. So what if you can't bring in new people? What do? We'll get old people to buy new books.
Mm-hmm.
Such an interesting market. It's like such a different market than like a lot of others. But I will say, like, we're still like, okay, the core books are out and we're so deep in it, it's like, okay, this like they finished their launch, but like we're 6 months out from the starter set. And it's not like the day it releases people find it. Like that's the entry point for a lot of new people. And like that's far on the horizon. And like I don't know, there's going to be people getting the starter set for Christmas next year, right? And that's going to be the beginning of their D&D journey. So it's still early days, even though it feels like, okay, now they're done coming out with a new edition. And like, who knows? There's a new season of Stranger Things coming out. Maybe that blasts, eventually. I've been waiting for it. I think it's November. I don't know. Too far away, but like that might blow things up again. The closing of Stranger Things, assuming they stick the landing, fingers crossed. So yeah, who knows? You need a scrying spell to figure out like where the market's going. They've also brought everything in house. There was like very early like, based on the publishing numbers, like they aren't selling any books. It's like, well, they stopped distributing those books through the distributors through Penguin. So like, yeah, there are no numbers there because they don't do business that way. So it's a little more occluded. Like I don't know what the D&D Beyond numbers are, and a lot of people are just digital now. So,
yeah, Teresa, there was a big explosion of D&D in 2020, but it started in 2014 and then 2016. Those were big. 5th edition coming out was a big milestone because it was so much better than 4th edition. Depending on who you ask, it was so much more new person friendly than 4th edition. I can definitely say that. Mm-hmm. And then 2016 was Stranger Things. So there was a cascade, and then 2018 or so was D&D Beyond. Then, WotC, did they buy it after the pandemic? I don't remember, but D&D Beyond was one of the big steps because it was the very best online D&D tool that anyone had ever made up till that point, for sure.
Yeah. But but then obviously the 2020 pandemic, right? Like that also was a huge catalyst to all sorts of gaming popularity.
And I don't want to like manifest something here, but like we could also be in that situation again. Who knows? I don't know, every 100 years or something, right? But like, who knows? Maybe we're all looking for hobbies that don't involve leaving the house.
Yeah. So any other discussion about the current state of the hobby? Or are we ready to move on to the next thing?
I'm kind of curious just to ask chat. Like if you were to give a grade, like A, B, C, or D, right, to 5.5, what grade are you giving?
You gotta let him use the F. You gotta let him use the F, Brad. I know some of these guys. You gotta put F in the mix.
So,
yeah. Oh, Teresa doesn't like it.
She's going straight to F. Yeah,
Teresa doesn't like it. Teresa does not like it. We know how they feel. So while we're waiting for those chat comments to come in, Ryan, do you want to tell us about the Waking of Willoughby Hall?
The Waking of Willoughby Hall is the one shot I have run the most, and it has been wildly different each time. In part because every time I've run this adventure, the party almost immediately splits up, and I'm running different rooms for different people. And if it happens once or twice, I'd be like, oh, that's weird. But like clearly, this is so interesting to explore this space that like that's a cool adventure. I can't say that about any other adventure I've run. Made by Ben Milton of Questing Beast fame. We ran it kind of using old school essentials. There were some people who are way more familiar with 5e mechanics at the table, so it became a hybrid of just like, the rules don't matter. This is all made up anyway. And we had a great time. And you guys explored. I said a third. I'm going to say maybe closer to a half of the content that is in there. We wanted to get out of there, but we could easily have played that module for 6 hours, 8 hours if we wanted to. It's great. It does a lot of things right that other modules do wrong. If you want more of an old school exploration vibe where like every room has multiple things that the players can interact with in interesting ways, get creative with, do all sorts, like I was playing as much as I ever play because I had no idea what you guys were going to do, how things were going to play out. Like I have a very high level concept of what's happening in there, but like every time I run that module, I am pleasantly surprised. It is great. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. If you want to watch us play it, stick around because we're about to.
In about 19 minutes from now, you can watch us play it, and we will be participating in the chat in varying degrees. I got to go do something real quick, but then I'll be back in the chat, and I'll watch the last couple hours with everyone.
It's a tearjerker. It's a real.
There are some, very, very interesting, dark and funny things that happen in this session, and great adventure. Just a really cool location, really cool hooks. The letter grades are coming in. Teresa gave D&D 5E and F, but Willoughby Hall a B+. Thanks for that. Mr. Vincent gives it an A-. I think Fred says 5.5 is a C, but 5E is a B-. Fred thinks they've taken a step back. Phil gives it a C. I'm expecting more innovation.
By that rubric, yeah, it depends how you grade it. By that rubric, I'm with Phil and Fred in that point of just like, I wanted more. I wanted more new, different shit. Especially if you're going to, get me to spend $150, maybe $150 twice.
Yeah.
Give me cool new things.
Like with the new Dungeon Master's Guide, I think it's a fantastic book for new Dungeon Masters, but it didn't have a whole lot of information that I felt like was new for me. So if I were rating it based on the usefulness to my Dungeons and Dragons game, I'd probably give it a C because the magic items are pretty useful. But for a new Dungeon Master, I'd say it's probably a full letter grade higher than the 2014 book. Whatever that, for new Dungeon Masters, I think it's a better book.
Yeah, I think if I was to grade it on its own, like separate, like if I just said, I'm grading this as a game unto itself, I would probably give it like a B+. I think it's a good, well-built game. But like everybody's saying here, we've already played a very similar, almost identical version of this game for the past 10 years, right? And that's going to skew that grade. So I think just as a game in and of itself, I give it a B+. But I'm kind of with the rest of the chat here that I've already played it for 10 years. And it's so similar to what I already played. I can't really give it that high of a grade. So kind of C+.
Yeah, and I can't help but be like hypercritical of any amount of jankiness in the system because this is not a new game. This is a revision of 10 years. So like any stupid thing that they've missed, right? The carrion crawler. We were just having a conversation with Mystic Arts about like the capitalization. Like anyone who's trying to homebrew is trying to pattern match their grammar, and like the reason things are capitalized is completely unclear and not systematic. uh, and
Yeah.
you had 10 years to like nail this. So like all these like little stupid contradictions or mistakes, if it were a brand new game, I would be a lot more forgiving of.
Yeah, and I think I said this early on in the whole process. I think when like the Player's Handbook first came out, like you're the big kid on the block. I mean, Wizards of the Coast, this is Dungeons and Dragons. This is the brand name that's kind of the umbrella over the whole hobby. And you've got all these resources at your disposal. Why are you not making one of the best games ever? Like, why is it not one of the best laid out games? Like, why is Free League, this, smaller company over here, kicking your ass on page layout and, aesthetic design, right? Why are all these other games that are coming out now being innovative and having interesting mechanics? And, it's like, if we look at it from that perspective, like Dungeons and Dragons should be a much better game, right?
Yeah, Fred's right here. If you want new players, the game has to be less crunchy. That's what I was screaming for on all the UA surveys last year. I was like, stop complicating things, simplify it, because there are much easier to learn games out there that don't have D&D's name recognition, but it doesn't take someone very long to be in the hobby before they realize that there are other games out there. You cannot keep it from them for very long once they get into this hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we are getting pretty close to the end of time. Do we want to save our Lego thing for next time, maybe?
I think so.
Sure.
Yeah. We could. We didn't put the Brad rant on the agenda. I don't know, Brad, if you're prepared to do that.
Well, I just sat there and trashed WotC with my last comment, so it'd be weird if I
Go
turned
off,
around.
King. Let's go.
It'd be weird if I turned around and defended them.
You don't have to do this, Brad. You don't have to.
No, you do. You do. You do.
Okay, Ryan says you do, so I gotta agree with Ryan. You have to do it now.
I'm the host now. Let me rearrange this hierarchy. No, do you, Brad?
No, I think we can save that for another discussion. But I think the point here is that there are very legitimate criticisms of Wizards of the Coast. But at the same time, I think there's some other criticisms of Wizards of the Coast that I think are kind of silly, and I could definitely rant on those. But to each their own, right? Everybody can have their opinion, and I'm free to tell them they're wrong.
You're welcome to your ignorant opinions.
You dummies.
At the end of the day, this whole thing, like, let's remind ourselves that this is a hobby and this is supposed to be fun, right? And I feel like we were talking about before, the tribalism thing, the clickbait thing, some of our fellow content creators are probably partly responsible for some of this with their with the clickbait nature of YouTube these days. Right? It's like everything's a crisis, and this is a hobby. We're supposed to be having fun with this stuff. And you can have your opinions, you have your approach to game design. You can do what you want to do with your version of D&D or whatever tabletop game you're playing. But we definitely don't need to look for things to be wrong, right?
I have a pet theory that there are a lot of voices in this space that are spending way more time complaining about shit than actually playing with other people. And maybe they haven't ever run the game. Maybe they haven't played the game, at a table for a long time. And I also think there's some opinions that clearly come from people who have been playing the game with the same people since they were 12 years old. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's certain perspectives that are like, oh, you've never sat down at a table with a stranger from a different background. But yeah, there sure seem to be a lot of people who are like playing a fundamentally different game than I am, at the very least. And I like variety. I played this game a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different people. And there's like some of the strongest, most repeated takes out there are just like, what? Why? Where's that coming from? Like, why are you, I don't know, so many Reddit threads yelling about capstone abilities. It's like, that's 3 years away, bro, for two sessions. Like that matters for 8 hours if you're lucky.
And
It's weird out there.
Unfortunately, today we don't have time to solve tribalism, but we'll put that on the agenda for next week. So be sure to come back next week when we have our solutions for how to unite everyone in the tabletop industry. But hey, first, in 9 minutes, coming up in 9 minutes, you should stay on this channel, the Landlocked Warlocks channel. I've been drinking a little today. Sorry, everyone. The Landlocked Warlocks channel, in 9 minutes now, we can watch The Waking of Willoughby Hall. And we're all in it, plus a couple other people that you know and love. And I think that about wraps it up for today. We didn't get to the Dungeon Master's Guide. I apologize about that. We'll make sure that we get to that next week. So, hey, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to Landlocked Warlocks, where you're watching this right now. You should do that. I'm GM Jim from Wizards and Wordslingers. Over there is...
I'm Brad Wolf from Diredan. And down there...
I'm Ryan Doyle. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your chat.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Chat was really active today. That's awesome. And we hope you guys will stick around for The Waking of Willoughby Hall coming up very soon. Thanks, and